Okay, everybody, thank you very much for coming along today. And as is our common practice, Ayako Tani, our main speaker, though we're also having John Liddell, her colleague, talking for a while, will tell us a bit about herself. Ayako, please tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Thank you. Then can I start sharing my screen?
Yes, okay. Do you want to share your screen now?
I have... okay.
It will help everybody to see what you're talking about.
So, can you see our photographs now?
Yes, I've seen a message I've never seen before, which is to fit it to the size of your screen. I'm not quite sure. It's a bit narrow. I'm not sure whether. Anyway, just carry on.
Okay, so yeah. So hello everyone. My name is Ayako Tani. So I'm a glass artist, and I recently started scientific work. So I was originally, I was born and grew up in Tokyo, Japan. Then I came to the UK in 2006 to study glass art at the University of Sunderland. And my PhD was, it's what's called practice-based research, which means I'm a practitioner as well as a researcher. So after my PhD, I started working with local Sunderland glassblowers at the National Glass Centre in Sunderland. That's how I naturally heard a lot about the history of British Pyrex industry and how those glassblowers were trained and worked for the Pyrex factory. Then, so I worked with them. I did like artistic projects with them. Then one of those projects was about glass ships in bottles, which I will tell more later in my talk. And then that's how I got to know many scientific glassblowers in Sunderland region and beyond. Then this year I moved from Sunderland to the University of Glasgow to start a new job as a scientific glassblower. And in this office next to me, I have to move camera. So this is John Liddell, senior glassblower of the university. So he's been doing scientific glassblowing for 25 years. He's my trainer today. So if when we have advanced question about scientific glassblowing, we can ask him. So that's the introduction of ourselves.
Okay, thank you very much, Ayako. Let me just say that to the audience, but we've now got 43 people present, which is quite good going. I'm sure we've got more. In fact, somebody trying to enter right now. I'll deal with all that. And we now introduce Ayako, invite Ayako to give her talk. May I just say immediately beforehand that the reason this came about was I used to regularly get across this Sunday paper called the Sunday Post because my mother was Scottish, but I stopped getting it most of the time during the pandemic. But about 8 months ago, I can't remember exactly when, I happened to buy a copy, and to my complete amazement, there was an article about glassblowing and Ayako, and I immediately thought that I must get her to talk to us, and she's talking to us today, and that's all thanks to the Sunday Post. So, Ayako, please start telling us about the history of glassblowing. I'm sure it'll be fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Then I start my presentation. So I think everyone today, you all know about borosilicate glass and what scientific glassblowing is. So I think I can do this explanation really brief. So okay, we bend and join glass tubes and make laboratory apparatus like this. And the same technique, like heating glass tubes on the tabletop burner and shape them, the same glass technique is called lamp working or flame working among the artistic glass community. So this is really a versatile technique. People use this technique to make a wide variety of products, like not only laboratory apparatus, but Christmas baubles, beads and marbles, miniature animals, and so on. And sizes, it varies as well. So you can make architectural size installation by using this technique. And Pyrex, I trust that you all know borosilicate glass very well, so I don't go into the details, but Pyrex is a brand name, and but because it's very well known, people call ovenware in general Pyrex. And for many people in Sunderland area, where Pyrex factory used to be, Pyrex means the company, it means their job, and it's the label of their work life. So I'd like to trace the history of Pyrex production in Sunderland. I'll have more images later on, so it's all texts on this slide, but I'll have more images, so please don't worry. So the company's name was James A. Jobling. It was named after the industrialist who took over the company in 1885. And before that, the factory was called Weir Flint Glass Works. And so this name, Weir Flint Glass or Weir Glass Works, these names remained till later years. We can see them printed on boxes, for example. And in 1921, James A. Jobling, the company, acquired the patent rights of Pyrex from Corning, New York. And so, and in 1922, they started the production of British Pyrex in Sunderland. So it was exactly 100 years ago from today. Then simple laboratory glassware was included from the right beginning. Then it was formally organized as a division in 1933. Later it was called the laboratory division. Then during the war and after the war, World War II, the scientific glassblowers were busy during the war and after the war because it supplied other heavy industries in the region. For example, at coal mines, each colliery in the region had small laboratories to analyze gas on site. So in those days, there were many jobs for the glassblowers to make and repair glassware for those small laboratories. Then, so the companies kept growing. In 1963, they built a new factory, designated factory for scientific glassblowing, also in Sunderland. Then I have video from those busy days. How do I play this? Can I? So I uploaded this video on YouTube, so I just skip to the middle for now, but you can see you can watch full video later if you like. Maybe I want to show maybe 2 or 3 minutes in the middle. So in this video, you'll see the various divisions of the factory. So it will show furnace glassblowing team, scientific glassblowing team, and some pressed ware making machines. So I I think you can see the whole picture of the factory, how it was in 1950s. So I stop video for now because it's long. Just checking, did everyone see the Peter? Did you see the video? Did it play okay?
Yes, it worked fine.
Okay, then I go back to the slide. So that's so I think you felt the atmosphere of the factory, how it looked in those days. I have more pictures, like close-up images of the scientific glassblowers at the factory. These random images, I found them in archive boxes at Sunderland Museum, like unsorted document boxes. So I don't know the details, but I believe they were from the 1950s. He's making coils. More. He's making pipeline fittings for QVF. And he is making a big coil also for QVF. But I can tell this is, the photo was from Pyrex factory definitely, because the glassblower is wearing the lab coat with company badge, Pyrex badge here. And slightly later than that, so maybe in the 1960s, this photo was taken, also at the laboratory division at Pyrex. And I can count at least 10 or more glassblowers in every row. So on the floor, there must be more than 40 or 50 scientific glassblowers working. Some tubing storage and packing station. And it says laboratory glassware. So it's company name, James A. Jobling, but it also says Weir Glassworks, Sunderland, on the box. So, so far I've shown the busy days, like how scientific glassblowing was flourishing in Sunderland at James A. Jobling. However, it started to struggle in the 1970s because the heavy industries started to decline nationally. So Jobling used to supply those other heavy industries. So the glass industry also suffered as well. And in 1972, the first group of people were made redundant. 4 senior scientific glassblowers were made redundant. Then, but at the same time, there were bright moments, like especially in 1976, the US President Carter, visited the factory. But overall, the glassblowers, they all knew that they would eventually lose their jobs. And yes, in the end, in 1982, the laboratory division was all closed. And everyone who wanted to remain in scientific glass, they had to relocate to Stone, Staffordshire. But those 4 glassblowers who left the factory in 1972, they started their own glassblowing business in Sunderland. And in 1979, they were established as Durham Glass, and they were focusing on the production of glass ships and bottles. Then in those days, glass ships and bottles were really popular as giftware. in those days. So they had huge orders, and scientific other glassblowers who left Pyrex, they joined their former colleagues at Durham Glass, one after another. So that transition happened in the 1980s. So the next video, this was filmed in 1976. So this video, it's from such like precarious times or transitional times. So you can find the full video from this link, but I show you some parts again. So this is a TV news reporting the visit of President Carter. I want to show some parts. Firstly, you can see the factory, how it looks, and so that's the view from the street. Let's play a little bit.
Factory at about mid-morning. The streets round about will be packed.
Okay.
Waiting to get a glimpse of one of the most powerful men in the world. There are 3,000 people employed at Corning's Sunderland plant, where they make consumer products like ovenware and tableware, as well as industrial and laboratory glass. The headquarters of the Corning company is in New York State. And when the president is at home in the White House, it's customary for him to present a piece of ornamental Corning glass to visiting dignitaries.
Many, many years, the traditional gift by presidents of the United States has been a piece of very high quality crystal called Duben, and that's manufactured in Corning. And Queen has a piece, Suzanne has a piece, and of course, as I say, it's a traditional gift to the head of the state.
Are you going to make a presentation of something made here to the president?
We are making the presentations of an item, an article that's been made by one of our employees. For the time being, we are keeping that confidential. It's certainly not a piece of Dubenware, but it illustrates the capability of the craftsmen we have here.
The presentation piece will in fact be designed and made by somebody then in your factory.
It will, yes. It will be made by, there have been made by one of the craftsmen who works in the laboratory.
I would imagine too, having seen it myself, that he's going to be pretty impressed with the teamwork that's involved in that.
Well, glassblowers, you know, they're an independent group. They like their independence, and they form a team. They work together for years, and it's a sort of craft that you can't pick up out of the book. You can't get somebody like a line and say, this is what to do. That's the early days of training. It's a leap. So it takes a long, long time for it to pick up this.
There isn't, in fact, as I understand it, a machine in the world that can do that process like a man.
That is so. I mean, you know, people say, well, how is it that this class still lives on? And
I skip a little bit because it's a furnace glass blowing studio.
At least we will be able to sort of say a few words about the process, so he won't be sort of completely sort of ignorant of what he's expected to see.
It's been said, Mr. Waring, that they're going to make sure the president doesn't just meet officials on this tour, that he's going to get a chance to meet the man and woman in the street, right? Is he going to do that here at your factory?
Exactly. It's going to be on this tour, a cross-section representing all levels of
Skip again.
He was presented with a magnificent glass model of St. George and the Dragon, designed and made by Andy Thompson, a 28-year-old lamp worker at the Sunderland factory. On top of the time it had taken Andy to research his beautiful presentation piece, he'd spent 40 hours perfecting his creation. Inside the factory, Mr. Carter got a close-up of the skills and teamwork that go into the making of a top-class product.
So I stop here again. So were you able to hear the sound?
Well, that was okay this time, a little bit faint, but that's okay.
Okay, so I go back to the slides. So this scene was included in the video, how the laboratory division looked like in 1976. So, but remember the what I spoke earlier, they all knew that eventually they will lose this factory job sooner or later. So that was that such precarious times. And in the video mentioned that scientific glassblower Andy Thompson made a gift trophy for the president. So this is the thank you letter Andy received from the president. And Andy in the middle. So he was a scientific glassblower, but he was known for his sculptural talent. He spent half of his work hours on making corporate giftware, corporate gifts, as a job within the factory settings. And so Andy and those other two glass blowers in the picture, and many other scientific glass blowers in the video, they left Pyrex in the next several years from that video, and they all entered the new enterprise of glass ships and bottles in the 80s. I interviewed many of them recently. I interviewed in total of 20 people. 7 of them were former Joblinks scientific glassblowers. The top right in the picture is Andy Thompson. Top left is Freddie Price, who started Jerome Glass, who set up the company initially. And they recall that their enterprise of glass ships and bottles was really successful initially. On the bottom right of the picture, Norman Veach, he recalls that his wage was doubled by making glass ships and bottles. Joseph, I just suddenly forgot his surname, sorry, Joe. He remembers that he bought his first car. So the business was really successful. So Pyrex offered them to move to Jobling's subsidiary company in Stone, Staffordshire. So they had a choice to transfer to Quickfit and Quartz in Stone, Staffordshire, but they didn't have to because they had the business of glass ships and bottles. And so these are some examples of glass ships and bottles they made in those days. So they were scientific glassblowers, they had skills. So if you can make intricate coil condenser, for example, you can easily put ship in a bottle. So they adapted their creative skills to new business. And so I've been collecting these vintage glass ships and bottles, and I interview those original makers who made them. Many of them are former scientific glassblowers, and I'm a practitioner myself, so I learned the related glass skills to myself so that I can pass them on to other people. So that's how my glass ships and bottles project grew, and that's how Peter knew me. So I have a lot to owe. I owe a lot to glass ships and bottles. These are the makers of glass ships and bottles I've identified so far. I'm not saying that this craft originated in Sunderland. There were other places making glass ships and bottles earlier than Sunderland, but those other places, they also had their backgrounds in scientific glass industry. So Sunderland wasn't the birthplace, but it was the capital of the production of glass ships and bottles. There were at least 9 makers of glass ships and bottles in Tyne and Wear, and it's clearly the influence of the Pyrex industry. So in this talk, I don't go further about the glass ships and bottles, but basically it was really successful initially for the high-end market, but eventually mass production started. It saturated the market in the 1990s, and the production boom ended. And today there's no maker left in the UK anymore. So it's a sad ending, but thanks to the boom of glass ships and bottles, the scientific glass blowers, they remained in Sunderland. Their skills remained in Sunderland. So please remember 2 people in this picture, the left and the middle, and the person in left is Brian Jones, and the person in the middle is Andy Thompson. They still practice glass blowing in Sunderland. Brian left and Andy in center. So most of their colleagues have been retired already. And Brian has his studio inside the National Glass Centre, and he trained me there. And Brian and Andy, they still do scientific stuff if they were asked to, but today they mainly work for artists. And one of the most significant projects they've done is this glass microbiology project. For the project was led by Jerome. Luke is an artist, so he sends Brian the design drawings, and Brian realizes them in glass. And Brian and Andy, they can achieve this in amazing quality because they were trained at Pyrex. So their skills, precision and speed, it came from their scientific glass backgrounds. So the skills of scientific glass blowing, it's indispensable not only for chemistry laboratories, but also for art and design industries. And I really strongly feel it because I came from artistic background. But now we are having a problem because there aren't many scientific glass blowers in the UK. The skill of scientific glass blowing is registered on the red list by the Heritage Crafts Association. And their website says there are less than 200 professionals currently. I started this year, so maybe 200 plus 1, but so the number is really small. Maybe in the 1970s, there must have been 200 practitioners in Sunderland only. So in Sunderland alone. So many skills have already been lost in the past 50 years. So it's important to keep these skills alive for the development of chemistry, of course, but also for creative industries, like artists and designers. So that's my motivation of doing these activities. giving talks like this. I do exhibitions as well. And this is our workshop at the University of Glasgow. So in our workshop, we don't only do standard items, but also we consult with researchers and develop tailor-made custom glassware. So, and we can, of course, we can do repair as well. So, in order to keep and redevelop the scientific glassblowing skills in UK, but it takes time and cost and a lot. But there's one thing you can do immediately, which is to stop buying low quality glassware. And low quality glassware, we mean they are thin, they are uneven thickness, and joints are imperfect. They might be not properly annealed. They are made of different types of borosilicate glass. So sometimes it glow in different color, pink tinted, and we feel like they melt at a lower temperature. And some products are made of soda glass. So, and problems of those glassware are that they are easy to break, hard to repair. So they may be cheap initially, but you don't save money in the end. And also it's not environmentally friendly because they are often made abroad, typically in India and China, and they break easily and not repairable. So it's bad for the environment. It increases the risk of accidents in your laboratory. It may affect to your insurance cost. So we want you to use good quality glassware. So please have these in mind. Is the product meeting the ISO standards? Where is it made? And we recommend not to choose soda glassware unless it has to be, unless you have a special reason that it has to be soda glass. And please consider having bespoke glassware from your local glassblowers. So it comes to the end of my talk today. I hope that more researchers will notice the benefit of being able to make bespoke gear from your bespoke glassware for your experiment. And hopefully more universities will reopen their closed glass workshops, and together we can contribute to the regrowth of the scientific glassblowing. So those are my websites, project websites, and our email addresses. So thank you very much for listening. Please ask us any question you might have.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ayako. A wonderful talk. Now, we've got some questions here in chat because I asked people to put the questions in chat. And the first question,
should I stop sharing the screen now?
You can read them, can you? Well, my question is that somebody said that Quickfit used to use male and female joints, but we won't go into that. But my question was, what happened to the Quickfit factory in Stone? And did it close down?
It moved. It's now part of the DWK, so it's owned by a German company.
Okay.
They've moved all of the production to Europe now. Split after Brexit, they just started shipping everything out.
Did everyone hear John?
But I mean, I remember when I bought the Quickfit catalogue, I didn't buy it. I was sent it in 1973. I think the Quickfit was still based in Stone then, which of course is near where is it? It's near Stoke, I suppose, isn't it? Stafford, between Stafford and Stoke, I think. Stone. Okay. The next question is yes. Sorry, I'm looking for the questions here. Robert Flynn, who used to work on the pharmaceutical industry, he in fact gave a talk last month, said, could you say something about, they just jumping around a bit here. Do you still use acetylene flame to melt glass? I had to draw out glass rods for air bleed for vacuum distillation at Pyrex Pharmaceuticals in the late 1960s. So do you still use acetylene air?
No. They're not going to let me share.
Oh.
So I'll just say you. No. We don't use acetylene.
No. John says no. But
I'll try to slow it down.
Oh, I see.
Okay. What do you use then? If you don't use air acetylene, what do you use? Hydrogen?
Peter, can you unmute John?
Okay, John. Okay, I try and unmute John. Okay. I thought you were going to use the same. Oh, okay. I've asked John to unmute now.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So did John want to say anything more about what you use to melt glass? Huh.
Well, we don't use acetylene. It causes excessive vaporization of the glass. So it's usually oxygen propane we'll use or oxygen hydrogen.
I see.
And your earlier question about Quickfit, I was muted at the time when I tried to answer it. So the Quickfit factory became Bibby Sterling, and then it became DWK. It was owned by a German company who moved the site away from Stone into Stoke-on-Trent. And then when we voted to leave at Brexit, they basically shut down everything they could and moved all production to Germany.
Okay. John, you might know the answer to this question. How are fused silica chromatography column manufactured? How are fused, it's difficult to say, how are fused silica chromatography columns manufactured? Okay, John, do you get that question?
They're basically manufactured the same as borosilicate is, it's just it's a higher temperature and they need to keep everything cleaner. So there's a lot of acid washing involved.
Right. Now, I've got another question here from Duncan Alexander. To what extent has scientific glass working been automated? That's a very good question.
More of your basic items, so beakers, test tubes, pipettes, burettes, these tended to be automated or semi-automated. But you're sort of, a lot of your handmade and lathe-made stuff, you just can't automate it. It's too involved.
Now, John, maybe another one for you, John, as well. Most of these questions are rather technical. Could you say, I mean, this would be, you could probably talk about this for hours, but somebody asked, could you say something about the formulae, well, formulation, perhaps one should say, of different glass mixtures?
Well, it depends what oxide and fluxes. Are you talking about, if you talk about borosilicate, you've got your brand names, so Pyrex, Jerome, Cymax, they all vary slightly in their formulation, but what it really comes down to is the feedstock. So the actual silica for starting it. The purer you can get that, the better your end product. So a lot of the imported glass that's coming in from Asia, that's the problem straight away, is their feedstock's quite poor, especially if you're going to get any quartz off them. It's nearly useless for the semiconductor industry because it can't get certified.
So has there ever been sort of any improvement in borosilicate glass, or is borosilicate glass basically still the best type of glass for scientific glassware?
Yeah, boros, it peaked, it's not going to get any better. What they keep advancing is quartz and trying to get it purer and purer and purer, as well as its UV and infrared transmission characteristics. So that's still an advancing field where borosilicate's got to a point where it's as good as it's going to get.
So following on from what was said earlier, that you wouldn't dare call glass joints male and female now. What are they called now? As far as I know, they're still called male and female joints, aren't they?
Yeah, they're still male and female.
Now we've got finally here, we've got a comment. This is really more in the way of a comment than a question, and I'll read it out because it's quite interesting, from Sue Goff. When I was at Glassblowing Greenford, which of course is in West London, from 1973 to 1988, we had a dedicated glass blowing workshop on site. Damaged pieces were returned for repair and specific items created for research. Recall that the expert's name was Ken, but I think he had other colleagues at the time. This brings up a point I was thinking of making, but almost decided not to. It's a very famous glass blower who died about 15 years ago, but did a lot of work for the Science Museum with somebody called Jim Frost, who was at the University of Reading. He was quite I think he was chairman of the Scientific Guild Blowers or something. He was one of the leading people in glass blowing, but he died about 1997, I think, and unfortunately, I think a lot of knowledge about earlier glass blowing died with him, sadly. So is there any more than that? No, I think that's about it. So that's all our questions and comments. And thank you very much, both of you, Ayako and John, for giving us such an interesting and quite striking talk about the early history of glass blowing, and in particular Jobling in Sunderland, which of course is a very well-known firm, and very sad, of course, that this is all now come to an end. But anyway, it continues in artistic ways, if not scientific ways. So thank you once again for a wonderful talk. Next week, we've got John Powers from Virginia Commonwealth University across the Big Pond, talking to us, or rather giving us, a tour of early to mid 18th century chemistry. So please do come to this talk, because I think it will be absolutely fascinating, and it will be at the usual time of 2 o'clock. Next month, in November, no, my mind's going to blank on that. Who have we got in November? Anyway, do try to come to next week's talk, and I'll send further details of next month in due course. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank you very much, Ayako and John, for speaking to us. And goodbye for now, and have a good time for the rest of the afternoon. Bye for now, and I'm ending the talk.